You think you know your skin. You've lived in it your entire life. You wash it, you moisturize it. Maybe you complain about it when it breaks out or wrinkles or scars. You think of it the way you think of a coat, something that covers you, something that keeps the outside out and the inside in. But here is what nobody tells you. Right now, as you're watching this, your skin is doing something that no human technology has ever fully replicated. It is simultaneously acting as a structural barrier, a chemical laboratory, a sensory network, an immune outpost, a temperature regulation system, and a self-repairing construction site. All at once, all without a single conscious instruction from you. This is not a coat, this is a spacesuit. And it was engineered over 400 million years of relentless trial and error. Consider the numbers for a moment, because the numbers are where the awe lives. Your skin covers approximately 21 square feet of surface area. It weighs between 7 and 11 pounds, making it the single heaviest organ in your body. It contains more than 19 million cells per square inch, and at this exact moment, your body is shedding somewhere between 30 and 40,000 dead skin cells every hour. You will replace your entire outer layer of skin, the part the world actually sees, in roughly 2 to 4 weeks. In your lifetime, you will shed approximately 40 kilograms of skin, enough to fill a bathtub. Pause on that. Don't move past it too quickly. The person you see in the mirror today is wearing skin that most of it didn't exist a month ago. You are, in the most literal biological sense, constantly becoming someone new. And yet most of us know almost nothing about how this system actually works. I know what you might be thinking. It's just skin. It's not like the heart or the brain. It just sits there. And that assumption is precisely the mistake that doctors and philosophers made for thousands of years. For most of recorded history, skin was treated as the least interesting organ, the packaging, not the product. Scientists obsessed over the heart, the lungs, the liver. Skin was the wrapper they threw away. But the moment science looked closer, everything changed. Because what they found underneath was not a simple barrier. It was an entire civilization, layered, organized, self-governing, and breathtakingly intelligent. To understand what your skin is actually doing, you need to go deeper than the surface. Much deeper. Let's go back, not a decade, not a century. Let's go back to ancient Greece, because that is where the first great misunderstanding about skin was born, and it shaped medicine for nearly 2,000 years. Aristotle, the man who catalogued the known world, believed that skin existed for one reason only, to define the boundary of the body, a container wall. Nothing more. He had no concept of skin as an active system. In his framework, the body's intelligence lived in the heart. The skin was simply where the body ended. Then came Galen of Pergamon, the Roman physician whose ideas dominated medicine from the 2nd century all the way through the Renaissance, a reign of influence lasting over 1,400 years. Galen believed that skin breathed in a vague, mystical sense, and that illness entered the body when this breathing was blocked. He wasn't entirely wrong in his intuition, but his framework had no mechanism, no structure, no cellular logic. He was gesturing in the right direction from 1,000 miles away. And so for 14 centuries, physicians treated skin disease by trying to balance the 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. If your skin erupted, you were given purgatives. If it dried and cracked, you were bled. The organ itself was never the subject of serious inquiry. It was merely a symptom board, a place where internal imbalance announced itself. The first crack in this worldview came in 1665 in a small room in London with a device that had only recently been made powerful enough to matter. Robert Hooke took a slice of cork, placed it under a compound microscope, and saw something that had never been seen before in human history. Tiny walled compartments repeating endlessly. He called them cells, from the Latin cella, meaning small room. He published his findings in Micrographia, and the biological world was never the same again. But it took another 2 centuries before anyone applied cellular thinking seriously to skin. In 1838, German botanist Matthias Schleiden and physiologist Theodor Schwann formalized the cell theory, the revolutionary idea that all living tissue is built from cells, and that cells are the fundamental unit of life. Suddenly, skin wasn't a wall anymore, it was a society a structured, layered, communicating society of billions of individual living units. Then, in 1882, came the discovery that would reframe skin's role entirely. Paul Langerhans, a German medical student, 21 years old at the time, was examining a thin section of human skin under a microscope when he noticed strange branched cells scattered through the tissue. Nobody knew what they were. For nearly a century, they sat in the literature as a curiosity, labeled simply Langerhans cells after their young discoverer. It wasn't until the 1970s that immunologists finally understood what Langerhans had stumbled upon: sentinel immune cells, specialized soldiers embedded directly in the skin whose entire purpose is to detect foreign invaders, capture them, and carry the intelligence back to the lymph nodes to trigger a full immune response. Your skin wasn't just a wall, it was a fortified border with its own intelligence service. That single discovery collapsed the old framework completely. And modern science, armed with electron microscopes and molecular biology, has spent the last 50 years going deeper still. What they found was an architecture so precisely engineered that it makes our best synthetic materials look primitive. Let's build this from the ground up. Because to understand what your skin does, you first need to understand what your skin is. And the structure is where the genius lives. Your skin is not one layer, it is three distinct systems stacked on top of each other, each with its own logic, its own cell population, its own mission. Engineers call this kind of design redundant layered architecture. You see it in aircraft fuselages, in submarine hulls, in spacecraft shielding. The principle is always the same. No single failure point should be able to compromise the whole. The outermost layer is called the epidermis. It is extraordinarily thin, between 50 and 150 micrometers in most places, roughly the thickness of a sheet of printer paper. And yet within that paper-thin zone, there are 5 distinct sublayers, each representing a different stage in the life cycle of a keratinocyte, the workhorse cell of the skin. At the deepest sublayer, called the stratum basal, new cells are constantly being born, dividing roughly every 200 to 400 hours. As they are pushed upward by the generations behind them, they undergo a programmed transformation. They manufacture a structural protein called keratin, the same protein that forms your fingernails and hair, and they gradually flatten, harden, and die. By the time they reach the surface, they are no longer cells in any living sense. They are keratin shields, interlocked, overlapping, essentially waterproof tiles. This outermost tile layer, the stratum corneum, is 15 to 20 cell layers deep and represents one of the most effective chemical barriers in the natural world. It is selectively permeable, meaning it decides what passes through and what does not. Water stays in. Most pathogens stay out. Certain lipid-soluble compounds can pass through, which is why nicotine patches and hormone therapies can be delivered transdermally. But the gate is narrow and carefully controlled. Think of the epidermis as the outer hull of a spacecraft. It takes the direct impact of the environment. It ablates, it sheds, it self-renews. And crucially, it contains no blood vessels whatsoever. It is nourished entirely by diffusion from below, a design choice that limits bleeding when the surface is breached. Below the epidermis lies the dermis, and this is where the real infrastructure lives. The dermis is 10 to 40 times thicker than the epidermis, and it is built primarily from collagen and elastin fibers arranged in a dense, interwoven mesh. Collagen provides tensile strength. Your skin can withstand approximately 3.5 megapascals of pulling force before it tears, a figure that rivals many industrial fabrics. Elastin provides recoil, stretch the skin, and it snaps back. Together they create a material that is simultaneously tough and flexible, a combination that materials scientists have spent decades trying to replicate synthetically and have not fully achieved. Within the dermis, you find the systems that make skin more than a barrier. Blood vessels, a network so extensive that if you unrolled every capillary in your skin and laid them end to end, they would stretch for 11 miles. Lymphatic vessels, draining excess fluid and carrying immune cells. Nerve endings of at least 6 distinct types, each tuned to a different class of sensation. Light touch, deep pressure, vibration, temperature, pain, and the position of hair follicles moving in wind. Sweat glands, between 2 and 4 million of them across the body's surface. Sebaceous glands, producing the oil film that keeps the epidermis supple and chemically hostile to many bacteria. Hair follicles, each one a complex mini-organ with its own stem cell niche and its own cycle of growth, regression, and rest. And below the dermis, anchoring the entire structure to the body beneath, lies the hypodermis, a layer of fat and connective tissue that acts simultaneously as thermal insulation, mechanical shock absorber, and energy reserve. In extremely cold environments, this layer is what stands between your core temperature and hypothermia. In impact scenarios, it is what prevents your bones from fracturing under blows that would otherwise be lethal. Now stop and consider what I just described. You have a self-renewing outer hull, a fiber-reinforced structural core laced with vascular and neural infrastructure, and a thermal and mechanical buffer anchoring the entire assembly to the body. No seams, no bolts, no maintenance windows. It repairs itself while you sleep. There is no synthetic material on Earth that does all of this simultaneously. But here is the thing. All of that is just the hardware. The truly astonishing part of your skin isn't its structure. It's what happens inside each individual cell at a scale 1,000 times smaller than anything I've described so far. Let's go smaller. Much smaller. We need to shrink down past what the eye can see, past what a standard microscope can resolve, down to the level where chemistry becomes behavior, where individual molecules make decisions that keep you alive. Because this is where your skin stops looking like engineering and starts looking like something closer to magic. Begin with the keratinocyte. It is born in the deepest layer of the epidermis, the stratum basale, as a round, metabolically active cell with a nucleus, mitochondria, and a full complement of cellular machinery. At the moment of its birth, it receives a signal. Not a conscious signal, not a chemical instruction from the brain, but a molecular handshake from the surrounding tissue, a cascade of proteins that tells it, "You are here, you have a job, begin." That job unfolds over approximately 2 to 4 weeks, and it is one of the most precisely choreographed sequences in all of human biology. The keratinocyte begins producing keratin, fibrous structural proteins that assemble inside the cell into a dense internal scaffold. As neighboring cells push upward from below, the keratinocyte migrates toward the surface, and as it moves, it undergoes a process called cornification, a form of programmed cellular transformation that is distinct from ordinary cell death. The nucleus is dismantled, the organelles dissolve. The cell envelope hardens into a cross-linked protein shell reinforced with lipids. What remains is not a dead cell in the conventional sense. It is a purpose-built shield, a biological ceramic tile, still performing its barrier function with a precision that required no living machinery to maintain. And here is the detail that stops most biologists cold when they first encounter it. This entire process, birth, migration, transformation, death, shedding, happens continuously, simultaneously, across the entire surface of your body, coordinated without any central command. There is no conductor. There is no signal from your brain telling your skin to renew itself. The system is autonomous. Each cell follows its own local instructions, and the global result is perfect, seamless, continuous renewal. But keratinocytes are only one voice in this cellular orchestra. Consider the melanocyte. There is roughly 1 melanocyte for every 36 keratinocytes in the basal layer, and its entire existence is devoted to a single, extraordinarily sophisticated task: photoprotection. When ultraviolet radiation from the sun penetrates the epidermis and begins damaging DNA in the basal cells, and it does this every time you step outside, without exception, the melanocyte responds. It synthesizes packages of melanin pigment called melanosomes and injects them directly into the surrounding keratinocytes via long cytoplasmic extensions called dendrites. The keratinocytes position these melanosomes like tiny umbrellas, arranged precisely over the nucleus, the location of the DNA, to absorb incoming UV radiation before it can cause a mutation. Let that settle for a moment. Your skin cells are manufacturing personalized UV shields, delivering them to their neighbors, and positioning them with subcellular precision, automatically, continuously, every day of your life. The system is not perfect. Cumulative UV damage still occurs, which is why skin cancer exists. but the degree of protection the melanocyte system provides is staggering. Research from the University of Copenhagen, published in 2012, estimated that melanin provides a sun protection factor equivalent to somewhere between 2 and 4, modest by sunscreen standards, but operating at zero cost and zero conscious effort every moment you are alive. Now recall the Langerhans cells we met earlier, those branched immune sentinels that Paul Langerhans discovered in 1882 and nobody understood for a century. Here is what they actually do. They sit in the epidermis with their dendrite arms extended through the gaps between keratinocytes, essentially sampling everything that touches the skin's inner surface. A bacterium breaches the outer layer. A fragment of a viral protein works its way through a microscopic crack. A chemical compound crosses the barrier. The Langerhans cell captures it, processes it, and migrates out of the skin entirely, traveling through the lymphatic system to the nearest lymph node, where it presents the captured fragment to T cells and triggers an adaptive immune response. Your skin is running a continuous environmental surveillance operation, 24 hours a day, without your knowledge or participation. And then there are the fibroblasts in the dermis, cells whose job is maintenance and repair. Under normal conditions, they are relatively quiet, producing the collagen and elastin that maintain the dermis's structural integrity. But the moment skin is injured, cut, burned, abraded, fibroblasts activate within hours. They proliferate, migrate toward the wound, and begin laying down new collagen at a rate that peaks around day 7 of the healing process. A small cut on your hand will be structurally closed, with new collagen bridging the gap within 72 hours. The cellular machinery that accomplishes this requires no instruction from you. You sleep, and your skin rebuilds itself. I know what some of you are thinking right now. All of this sounds impressive, but my skin breaks out, it scars, it ages. It clearly doesn't work that well. And that is a completely fair observation. But consider what you are actually measuring when you see a scar or a wrinkle. You are seeing the output of a repair system operating under imperfect conditions: chronic UV exposure, nutritional deficiencies, mechanical stress, infection. The fact that the system produces any coherent result at all under those conditions is the remarkable part. The baseline capability, operating under ideal conditions, is extraordinary. But none of these cellular processes happen in isolation. Every one of them is embedded in a web of communication that connects your skin to every other system in your body, in ways that science is only beginning to fully map. And that connection is where things get genuinely surprising. Here is something your doctor probably never told you. Your skin is not separate from your immune system, your nervous system, your endocrine system, and your cardiovascular system. It is not a passive envelope surrounding those systems. It is an active participant in all of them simultaneously, sending signals, receiving signals, modifying its own behavior in response to conditions happening deep inside your body, and in turn influencing conditions that have nothing to do with the surface at all. Let's start with the connection that surprises people most: skin and the endocrine system. Your skin manufactures hormones, not in a metaphorical sense, in a precise, measurable biochemical sense. The most consequential example is vitamin D. When ultraviolet B radiation from sunlight strikes the epidermis, it triggers a photochemical reaction in a cholesterol compound called 7-dehydrocholesterol, converting it into pre-vitamin D3. This compound is then thermally converted into vitamin D3 within the skin itself, before being released into the bloodstream and processed by the liver and kidneys into its active hormonal form, calcitriol. Calcitriol regulates calcium absorption in the intestines, controls bone mineralization, modulates immune function, and influences cell growth and differentiation across virtually every tissue in the body. A 2010 study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism estimated that skin synthesis accounts for approximately 90% of the vitamin D in most human bodies. The remaining 10% comes from diet. Think about what that means. The structural integrity of your skeleton, the regulation of your immune responses, the controlled growth of your cells, all of it depends overwhelmingly on a photochemical reaction happening in your skin every time you step into sunlight. Now consider the nervous system connection. And this one is even more intimate. Your skin and your nervous system are, in the most literal embryological sense, siblings. Both develop from the same tissue layer in the embryo, the ectoderm. They diverge early in fetal development, with one sheet of cells becoming the brain and spinal cord, while an adjacent sheet becomes the epidermis. But they never fully separate. The dermis contains the terminal endings of somewhere between 1 and 4 million individual nerve fibers, representing every sensory modality the body possesses. And the communication runs in both directions. The skin doesn't just receive signals from the nervous system, it sends them. Keratinocytes produce and release neuropeptides, signaling molecules that were once thought to exist only in neural tissue. Substance P, calcitonin gene-related peptide, nerve growth factor. These compounds are synthesized in skin cells and act locally on nerve endings, mast cells, and blood vessels, modulating pain sensitivity, inflammation, and vascular tone. When you are chronically stressed, your body floods with cortisol, and cortisol directly suppresses the skin's barrier function, measurably increasing transepidermal water loss and reducing the rate at which the epidermis repairs itself after injury. This is the biological mechanism behind the clinical observation that wounds heal more slowly in people under psychological stress. It is not psychosomatic, it is a documented, measurable immunological cascade connecting mental state to skin physiology. Pause here, because this has consequences that reach into everyday life in ways most people never connect. Consider Margaret, 73 years old, living alone in a house that gets too cold in winter, grieving a husband she lost 2 years ago. She notices her skin is drier than it used to be, more prone to cracking around the knuckles, slower to heal when she scrapes herself gardening. She assumes it is simply age, and age is a factor. The epidermis does thin by approximately 6% per decade after the age of 30, and sebaceous gland output declines, reducing the lipid content of the skin's surface film. But the chronic low-grade stress of grief and isolation is also measurably compromising her skin barrier function. The cold is reducing peripheral blood flow to the extremities, slowing the nutrient delivery that fibroblasts need to maintain collagen production. These are not separate problems. They are one interconnected physiological state expressing itself across multiple systems simultaneously. Margaret's skin is telling the story of her entire internal environment. It always is. For all of us. This is what dermatologists mean when they describe skin as a diagnostic window. Jaundice, yellowing of the skin, signals liver dysfunction. The butterfly rash across the cheeks and nose is a hallmark of lupus, an autoimmune condition centered in the immune system. Acanthosis nigricans, a darkening and thickening of skin in the neck folds and armpits, is one of the earliest visible signs of insulin resistance, often appearing years before a diabetes diagnosis. Psoriasis, long treated as a skin condition, is now understood to be a systemic inflammatory disease with significant associations to cardiovascular risk. Patients with severe psoriasis have a 58% higher relative risk of major cardiac events, according to a 2006 study from the University of Pennsylvania. Your skin is not separate from what is happening inside you. It is the outside of what is happening inside you. And when it fails, when the barrier breaks down completely, the consequences are immediate and severe in a way that clarifies exactly how much work the system was doing silently. Burn patients are the most dramatic demonstration of this. When more than 30% of the body's skin surface is destroyed by severe burns, the body loses its ability to regulate fluid loss, maintain temperature, and exclude pathogens simultaneously. Fluid pours out of exposed tissue at a rate that can cause fatal hypovolemic shock within hours. Core temperature becomes impossible to maintain. Bacterial invasion of the exposed dermis begins almost immediately, which is why infection, not the burn itself, is historically the leading cause of burn mortality. Modern burn units address this through immediate fluid resuscitation, temperature-controlled environments, and the application of temporary biological dressings, essentially artificial skin substitutes that attempt to replicate what the original skin was doing, imperfectly and temporarily, while the body tries to regenerate. Those substitutes cost between $300 and $800 per square foot to apply. A burn covering 30% of the body surface area in an average adult represents roughly 6.3 square feet of skin. The economics of that calculation tell you something about the value of what you are wearing right now, for free. And yet, despite everything science now knows about the skin's structure, its cellular machinery, its systemic connections, its self-repair capability, there remain deep, fundamental questions that remain unanswered. We do not fully understand why the immune tolerance of the skin, its ability to coexist with trillions of commensal microorganisms without triggering inflammation, breaks down in conditions like eczema and psoriasis in some people and not others. We do not have a complete mechanistic explanation for why psychological stress accelerates skin aging at the cellular level, though the telomere research of Nobel laureate Elizabeth Blackburn suggests the answer lies in oxidative damage to DNA. We do not know with precision how the skin's microbiome, the ecosystem of approximately 1.8 trillion microorganisms living on your surface, communicates with the immune cells embedded beneath it, though the research emerging from institutions like the Salk Institute and the NIH Human Microbiome Project is beginning to map those signals. The more precisely we look, the more complexity we find. And that complexity points in one direction only. We started with a coat, a simple, unremarkable covering that you've worn every day of your life without thinking about it. Something you wash, something you moisturize, something you occasionally complain about in the mirror on a bad morning. And what we found when we actually looked was something almost incomprehensible in its sophistication. A self-renewing outer hull that replaces itself completely every 2 to 4 weeks, shedding 40,000 cells per hour without a single conscious instruction from you. A layered structural architecture that combines tensile strength, elastic recoil, and selective permeability in a configuration that no synthetic material has successfully replicated. A cellular workforce of keratinocytes, melanocytes, Langerhans cells, and fibroblasts operating in precise coordination, manufacturing UV shields, running immune surveillance, repairing structural damage, all simultaneously, all autonomously, all invisibly. A hormonal factory producing 90% of your body's vitamin D from sunlight. A sensory network of 1 to 4 million nerve fiber terminals translating the physical world into information your brain can process. A diagnostic surface that reflects, in real time, the state of every internal system, your immune balance, your hormonal status, your cardiovascular health, your psychological state. 21 square feet, 7 to 11 pounds, the largest organ in your body, and until approximately 10 minutes ago, you probably thought of it as packaging. I want to offer you a reframe, not a metaphor, but a genuine shift in perspective that I think changes how you move through the world. Your body is not a collection of parts. It is not a heart pumping blood, a brain processing signals, lungs exchanging gases, skin covering the outside. That is the inventory view, the parts list, and the parts list misses everything that actually matters. What your body is, what it has always been, is a self-regulating, self-repairing, self-communicating system of extraordinary depth, operating across scales from the molecular to the organismal, integrating information from the environment and from within, making 10,000 adjustments per second that you will never feel and never know about. Your skin is not separate from that system. It is that system, expressed at the boundary between you and everything else. Every morning when you wake up, you are wearing something that 400 million years of evolutionary pressure refined into the most sophisticated environmental interface ever produced. It has kept your ancestors alive through ice ages and equatorial heat, through infection and injury, through environments that should have killed them and didn't. It is keeping you alive right now, not passively, not inertly, but actively, intelligently, relentlessly. The philosopher Albert Camus wrote that the absurd arises from the confrontation between the human desire for clarity and the world's unreasonable silence. I think about that sometimes in relation to biology. We spend our lives looking outward, at screens, at horizons, at other people, searching for meaning and complexity in the external world. And all the while, the most intricate, most elegant, most deeply complex system we will ever encounter is the one we are living inside. You are not observing the world from a distance. You are interfacing with it every second through 21 square feet of biological genius that you never had to earn, never had to build, and never have to maintain consciously. That is not nothing. That is, in the most precise scientific sense, remarkable. And remarkability, when you truly absorb it, tends to change behavior. People who understand what their skin is actually doing become more deliberate about UV protection, not out of vanity, but out of respect for a system they now understand. They reconsider chronic sleep deprivation, knowing that the majority of fibroblast repair activity peaks during deep sleep, between midnight and 4 in the morning. They think differently about chronic stress, knowing its measurable effect on barrier function and wound healing. They look at the elderly woman with dry, cracking skin and understand that they are seeing the output of a system operating under compounded physiological pressure, not simply aging, but a complex systemic state expressed at the surface. Knowledge changes perception. Perception changes behavior. Behavior changes outcomes. So here is the question I want to leave in the comments section, and I want a specific answer. On a scale from 1 to 6, 1 being the hook that opened this video, 6 being this conclusion, which part made you stop and actually think? Not which part was most interesting in an abstract sense. Which part landed for you personally? Write the number, write one sentence about why. I read every comment in the first 48 hours, and the answers genuinely shape what I make next. And one more thing. Think of one person in your life who is currently dealing with a skin condition: eczema, psoriasis, chronic dryness, unexplained breakouts, and who has been told, explicitly or implicitly, that it is superficial, that it is cosmetic, that it is not serious. Send them this video. Not with a message, not with an explanation, just send it. Because what this video demonstrates, in 2,000 years of scientific history and 400 million years of evolutionary biology, is that there is nothing superficial about the surface. There never was. If the way you think about your own body shifted even slightly today, if you will look at your skin tomorrow morning with even a fraction more respect than you did this morning, then subscribe, because this channel exists for exactly that moment. The moment a fact becomes a feeling. The moment information becomes understanding. There is more to explore. There always is. And we are just getting started.